The views and opinions of this program are those of the host, guests, and callers. There is substantial risk of loss in trading futures and options, which you should carefully consider prior to trading. Today's episode of Market Talk is brought to you by Growmark FS. Keeping up with the latest in ag is a challenge, to say the least, but there are experts nearby ready to help. You'll find them at your local FS. You can trust them to bring you customized agronomic, grain, and energy solutions bored of the latest thinking. That's because FS specialists receive continuous training that keeps them current on the latest trends, practices, and technologies. So you'll get local expertise that's both exceptional and up to date. Visit fssystem.com to learn how FS is bringing you what's next. And joining us now here on the program, it is always great to catch up with him and have a conversation. We welcome in Richard Fordyce, Business Growth Director for Agriculture at Osborn Barr Paramore, OBP. He is joining us here for our monthly conversation. Richard, always great to talk to you. I hope things are going well there in Northwest Missouri.
You know, Jesse, they are, and always look forward to our monthly visit. It's good to hear from you.
Definitely. Well, speaking of how things are going in Northwest Missouri, obviously spring planting season has been rolling along pretty quickly in most areas, including, I believe, in your neck of the woods. So catch us up. How's things on the farm there with spring planting? What are you hearing from your neighbors? What are you hearing from folks around the region as far as how that spring planting's been going?
Well, you know, Jesse, we've been pretty fortunate here. You know, it was cold early, which got us started a bit late, or a little later than normal. And then, you know, boy, we had some really good running, you know, several days in a row. Got rained out maybe a couple times, but not washed out. So we finished here, you know, gosh, it's probably been a couple of weeks ago at least.
Mm-hmm.
You know, most folks in our area, in our region, you know, are probably finishing up, or a majority of folks are finished. But I would say that, you know, a couple of places or a couple of issues around planting had been an issue until just the last few days. And that was extremely dry topsoil moisture, right? Like, so a lot of guys that I talked to south of here, maybe east of here, had actually shut the planters off, waiting for some moisture, you know, for fear that they'd get that seed in the ground and there would just be enough moisture to sprout it. And then, you know, it's going to, you know, it wouldn't survive. So they were waiting. You know, we had a series of systems that had come through the region, you know, late last week, over the weekend, and then early this week.
Mm-hmm.
That should be supplying some of that moisture, you know, for folks to finish up. And then you get like the high plains, northern plains. I talked to a couple of friends up there last week, and they got a really late start, or typically just from temperatures and moisture, too cold and too wet. But they're running now. And so I did see NASA's numbers. I think, you know, nationwide, I think corn is like 65% planted, soybeans around 40. But I'm sure, you know, again, we've talked about this before. You know, if a big swath of the country gets a good few days with the equipment we have today, man, you can really knock out a lot of acres in a day.
Yeah, I'd have to think by Monday we're going to see another big uptick when it comes to that planting progress nationwide, as especially we've seen Illinois and Iowa really kind of leading the pack here in the last couple of weeks with that planting progress, which is something that we are definitely accustomed to. You know, I think now as far as spring planting goes in many areas, it's going to turn to emergence. How does that crop look coming out of the ground? I think that's going to be a big key for not only traders in the marketplace, but just farmers, obviously looking to see the health of this crop that they've put into the ground, this very expensive crop that they put into the ground this year, Richard.
Yeah, when you said expensive, my eyebrows raised up. We got the fertilizer bill early in the week, and I about fell out of the chair. But you know, expecting it, you know, I was expecting it, but you know, when you see it actually on paper, it's a stark wake up that, you know, we did, you know, obviously we've seen some, you know, backing off in the, you know, on the price of some inputs this year as related to last year. but it still costs a lot of money to plant a crop. Depending on what folks are investing, at what level, their fertility program is or whatnot, where they at in their seed decisions. You can get $1,000 an acre in a corn crop, pretty fast. And then, soybeans aren't far behind, as far as what that investment is per acre. So, we are seeing, like I've driven around quite a little bit in this region in the last several days, and actually what's been planted looks like Emergence is pretty good. I saw some soybeans that were pretty for this time of year were pretty big, 2 or 3 inches tall. Certainly there's a lot of acres that don't look like that, but from what I've seen around here, and I've not heard a great deal from folks I've talked to about emergence issues, at least in this region. So, again, you're right. That's a critical time. Planting, certainly, emergence, getting that crop started, and then letting Mother Nature take over.
Very, very true. Well, we got a few other issues we want to touch on here today. And I think just in general, let's talk about the Farm Bill and a kind of an update there first. And to me, it feels like we're still at a bit of a standstill. We're having Farm Bill listening sessions. We're gathering input. We're starting to see some work here in DC on this, but also it feels like the push-pull between SNAP work requirements, the nutrition title of the Farm Bill versus the farm safety net. That's kind of the two things that really stand out in the conversations right now. Is that kind of what you're hearing as well, Richard?
It is, Jesse. And, you make some great points, in that question. And, I think that, what further complicates it, and you certainly mentioned it, is the debt ceiling conversation.
Oh, yeah. We were talking about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, understanding, kind of, I guess, where both sides, the administration, the GOP leaders, and where they would like to see that, and obviously when you think about a federal budget, federal debt ceiling limits, there are priorities on both sides of the aisle. And one that has been a bit of a lightning rod are the SNAP, SNAP work requirements. Can you institute a system where either some of the work requirements remain, they make those just a little more stringent. And if you think about the dollars going into the SNAP program, if you could pull 1 million people off of SNAP or whatever, let's list, just hypothetical numbers, the less people that are participating in the program or more people that are participating at a lower level, obviously the cost of that program goes down. And so I think that is certainly one of the conversations that's happening around. So it's two conversations, right? It's the debt ceiling. It's the debt ceiling discussion. And then I think at the same time, we could find some cost savings in the nutrition title. If the GOP are allowed to impose or pass some of these more, stricter work requirements. And then that's also part of that Farm Bill discussion, right? Because as we know, the nutrition title, depending on the year, depending on the Farm Bill that passes, 88% of the expenditures in the Farm Bill go into that nutrition title. So it is a big chunk of the money that's expended. And so that's a very important conversation. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here, but, each time we try to talk about a Farm Bill, there are some of the folks that say, should we pull the farm programs out and make that the Farm Bill, and then the nutrition title would go away and it would be some other type of legislation? Maybe sounds good on its face, but we don't want to go down that road. We got a whole bunch of folks that are interested in the nutrition title. We have less folks that are interested in a Farm Bill. If you keep them both together, you have a lot of people that are trying to get this thing passed. You mentioned safety net. Certainly that is, that is something that whether it's the Farm Bureau, whether it's commodity organizations, other groups, that always are advocating on Farm Bill and farm legislation, a solid safety net certainly is at the top of the list. Now, whether that is the ARC and PLC programs, raising reference prices, a reallocation of base acres, making a very strong federal crop insurance system and maintaining that. All those things are in. I think they're all in the skillet, and they're all moving around. And I know that there is a constant drumbeat of farm country that says we have got to maintain a strong safety net. So I don't know that there's been a lot of progress, but certainly I think as we're getting closer to the expiration of the 2018 Farm Bill, we're going to be hearing a lot more about what are those issues that are dividing folks, and what are the issues that are bringing folks together and they have agreement on.
We're having a conversation today with Richard Fordyce, Business Growth Director for Agriculture at Osborn Barr Paramore. Richard, real quick, you brought up the debt ceiling as part of that discussion around the Farm Bill. Obviously, we've never defaulted on the nation's debt, but we're also very, very partisan here, probably the most partisan we've ever been. And I know that there's a lot of worry around this debt ceiling and whether or not it will get raised, and the fight is going on in D.C., and who knows what's going to happen here. But obviously, it's a lot of conjecture. It's a lot of what if. But if this debt ceiling doesn't get raised, I can't imagine what it would do to the jobs, economy, et cetera, et cetera. This could be really, really tough, couldn't it?
Oh, without a doubt. And I think that, when push comes to shove, you're exactly right. We do have, I think, ideological differences for sure. Those are split down political parties. But at the end of the day, I think both sides would recognize, the damage that that could do. And, I have to think that they're going to come to some agreement and get something done. Because just think about every aspect of life would be affected by that. I know several months ago we talked about the rail strike, and what kind of devastation that could have on agriculture and really, frankly, a lot of other sectors of the economy. And kind of right at the last minute, folks got together and resolved it. The debt ceiling conversation certainly is a much larger conversation than resolving the rail strike. But I have to think that the leaders on both sides of the aisle are going to come together with something that they can both agree on. So let's hope that's the direction.
Let's hope that's the direction. All right, one other issue I want to talk with you about here. The Supreme Court ruling here just a week or so ago on Proposition 12, California's law looking at the pork industry, 5-4 ruling. And it bans the sale of pork from pigs that are kept in tightly confined spaces. And conservative Justice Neil Gorsuch authored the court's main opinion saying, quote, while the Constitution addresses many weighty issues, the type of pork chops California merchants may sell is not on that list, end quote. Essentially, they said that they shouldn't be deciding this issue and they leaving it up to the states. Obviously, the pork industry very disappointed by this. I have a feeling they might turn to Congress here to try and do something. What's your thoughts on this whole Prop 12 situation, Richard?
Well, obviously, Jesse, we've been watching this a long time. I think it was 2018 when the voters in California approved Proposition 12. And at the time, I think I was in Washington, at the time. Yeah. When that went on the ballot, I think there was a lot of angst in the ag community, just wondering what the ripple effect of that decision was going to be. And I don't care what state you're in. If you get a ballot initiative on the ballot, that's a wild card because you don't know how those voters are going to what they're going to decide in a ballot issue. So I think on the front end, that was a concern that those of us at the time in agriculture were a bit worried about. Like, what are the voters in California going to do? Do they fully understand the issue? We've talked on this program multiple times, the complexity of agriculture, We have to be advocates every day talking about the good things that are happening in U.S. agriculture.
Yep.
And you can't do that in a soundbite in a ballot a proposition election, right? It's very hard to get that level of education out there. So voters in California passed it. I mean, it wasn't overwhelmingly passed. I think 60% maybe voted in favor of Proposition 12. And immediately there were lawsuits saying, you can't, as a state, impose production practices in another state. So essentially, that's what it did. It basically said, if you're going to sell pork or you're going to sell chicken or you're going to sell eggs into California, they've got to be raised in a certain way. And you did a great job explaining what that certain way was. So Supreme Court, in my mind, a surprising decision. Kind of given where, conservatives and less conservative justices on the court, what I thought would be the decision was not what ultimately happened. And so, yeah, I think you're right. I think that we need to be really careful about one-off states' requirements, right? Because if this thing goes forward and this happens, there will be pork that is raised in a compliant manner for California, and it will be shipped to California. But what would happen if Missouri or Kentucky or Texas comes up with something different, right? Like they put something on the ballot that's different. Then you've got to adjust as a production unit a different way of raising these animals or whatever, for eggs, broilers, for pork. And I think that's another kind of slippery slope. It's very difficult based on the production and processing that we have perfected over 100 years to make safe, affordable, and a great supply of food for Americans and people literally across the globe. If folks are making decisions that affect that production that number one, don't understand it, number two, can really cause a disruption in a whole bunch of things, right? The production system, the supply chain, all of that sort of thing. And so, I think that you're right, Jesse. They like this thing made it to the Supreme Court. That's a big deal. I think you're right. I think there may have to be a fix in Congress. Again, that goes into these discussions about states' rights and all that sort of thing. Yep. But we've got to be very careful, when we are mandating in one state what another state does in its agricultural production practices.
Very true. Well, and Senator Grassley from Iowa has come out this week and said he's going to introduce some sort of legislation on this matter. So we might see something in Congress. Richard, great thoughts. Before we let you go, any final thoughts you want to share with us here today?
Well, it's just always good to visit with you. I think we find topics every month that I hope folks find interesting.
I hope so too.
And, just thinking about, all of the ag producers out there that are still, trying to finish planting for the 2023 season. All of those agricultural producers that do such a great job, work so hard to bring food to the American public and to the globe, and just want to say a thank you to them and just to be careful out there.
Well, I will echo that sentiment, and we appreciate the time as always. We'll talk with you next month. That is Richard Fordyce, Business Growth Director of Agriculture at Osborn Barr Paramore. Richard, thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Jesse. Good to talk to you.